test where we talking about, in the words of Billie Holiday, them that's got shall get, them that's not shall lose. So the Bible says, and that still is news. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, and that is what? The test. Having taken the test. Everybody doesn't have to take the test. But guess what? Some do, because that's what they're called to do. In any event, let me talk a little bit about the next externship, or I guess I'd have to call it Locums Tenem, that was significant. Now that we're dealing with education, Locums Tenem, and how I became a good doctor. It was my first day at a Locums Tenem, covering the practice of doctors working in Katy, Texas. I was hired by a recruiter, also known as a headhunter, for Dr., let's call him Zealand, who needed a vacation. That's all I knew. I had found most of these doctor substitution jobs pretty routine after my excellent training in emergency, family, and gynecologic medicine, as well as pediatric medicine. There was little that could scare me in the emergency room, least of all blood and guts. This one started off with about the same, being about my 5th office covered, and was well until the orientation to this relatively small office introduced me to a lot of noise coming from the waiting room. I decided to go into the waiting room. There, and let's call him Dr. Zealand's office, small waiting room, with 2 rather apprehensive patients, was Bill Zephyr, the boyfriend of our receptionist, shouting with a can of gasoline in his hand. I immediately bridled my fear, thinking, what have I gotten myself into? Finally, coming to my senses, I made it out. What he was saying basically was that in some type of half bilingual language, that, is this what you wanted, Christine? As I said, he said it rather unintelligibly. I retarded. Regardless of she wants cat, regardless of what she wants, we need to go outside. That means you and me. I said this rather emphatically. As we were leaving the receptionist area to the parking lot, he doused himself with gasoline, then tossed the can behind him as he was walking into the parking lot. Again, he asked, is this what you want me to do? Without waiting for an answer, he struck a wood match, holding it at arm's length. Okay, you can't hardly see the arm there. And guess what? The wind blew in. Poof! Boy, it was on fire. Man on fire. I immediately said, lay down the road, man. Lay down the road. I told him this as he was crying and shouting at the top of his voice. I immediately took off my doctor's lab coat, which I wore the full length all the time, and ran toward him. By the time I got to him, which was about 20 yards, he was writhing in pain, still on fire, smoldering a little bit with small amounts of fire, as I said, still burning. The lab coat was effective, for the most part, in putting out the remaining fire smoldering. An ambulance was called, and its response time in Katy, Texas was quick. This was in the 80s, early 80s. Bill turned out to be an undercover officer investigating Dr. Zealand and his rather unscrupulous prescribing habits. I must say, at that time, all I prescribed was about 3 to 4 Tylenol codeine at the most. That's the most you were getting, you know. And don't ask me for something. I was from St. Louis, and I knew high GOs. You weren't going to get over on me as far as getting medication that you go back out and sell. But anyway, that was my attitude at the time, was I was under prescribing, to be honest with you. Anyway, the pharmacist that filled Dr. Pointer's prescriptions, I'll just call him Jack Pointer for the time being. I'll later tell you who that is. Basically, he and I got into it because I wasn't filling the prescriptions like he wanted to. That was my first, quote unquote, introduction to Bill Pointer. In any event, Bill, the undercover officer, had fallen in love with the receptionist and had a tempestuous affair. Nothing got investigated because he was too busy falling in love with Christine, which I believe was the plan. No information was transferred to authorities. When the guy got back, he continued on doing business as usual. And it wasn't for years, and I'm talking about maybe 5-6 years later, that I heard from Bill Pointer, or I should say Jack Pointer, the quote-unquote pharmacist in that area. It's also at this time that I did meet Rhonda Patterson, who was a good friend. I will mention her name and hope I don't get in any trouble. I hope she's all right. I haven't been able to get in touch with her. I called Dr. Zeeland hoping that he had not caught his plane to Australia. I was hoping I could cancel the trip. He didn't cancel it, even though I caught him in the airport. I fought with Jack Pointer for 1 week during the time that I was covering about telling me what to prescribe. I picked up another pharmacy to call the prescriptions in, and another and another. None would take Dr. Zeeland's patients' prescriptions or fill the pain medications due to their concerns for addictions in the patients. After going back to Jack Pointer, who had been fired from Brooks Brothers Pharmacy for his unscrupulous habits of having sex with the patients and actually prescribing and changing prescriptions. He basically ended up getting a 15-year term, which I'll get into that later, which he didn't do one day for, and guess why? He lied on me. But anyway, we'll go through that later. We'll talk about that later. We struggled through the week, needless to say. He swore that he would return the favor to me for not being in compliance with the program. He did. This is why I write from these prison walls as I was writing. He cooperated with federal authorities to falsify evidence against me, claiming that I stole his patients after he was busted and convicted and barred from any pharmacy work. It took me a little while to figure this out, but this was years later, as I said earlier. We're going to stop right now